Our guest in the Fast Lane today is no stranger to the microphone. He's one of our best-known broadcasters for whom the phrase love him or hate him could have been invented. But it's as a politician that he's been in the news recently, with his candidacy for ACT throwing a fascinating spanner in the election works. I'm referring, of course, to Paul Henry, and he joins us now. All right, well, welcome, Paul. Welcome to the podcast. Should we start with a quiet little game of shoot, shag or marry?
If you insist. But this time I'll ask you the question.
Oh, gosh. Okay, no. Look, I couldn't believe that. I saw that just as I was coming down. And, the very first thing I was going to ask you was that the media attention has sort of finally died down a little bit, and I was going to ask you what you made of all the coverage. And then here it is again today. You're top of the Herald and top of stuff once again. But has the world lost its sense of humour? I read the story before I came down. I thought, I cannot believe how serious this is being made into a story.
The world has lost its sense of humour, and I think we're at the very cutting edge of that in New Zealand. I hate the term woke, but we're woke. And for Labour to take high dudgeon at this, I mean, do they, if they seriously believe this is anything even vaguely resembling a credible threat, then I think Winston should be very, very worried.
Yeah, I just thought it was so ridiculous. Clearly a comment, I didn't hear it, but clearly a comment made in jest in response to the situation. I just thought, oh my goodness, is that what it's come
to? Absolutely.
But it does make me wonder what you sort of think of the media coverage in general, because, last week you were the talk of the town. You were the only story in town, really. It was absolutely massive coverage. And I sort of wonder what you made of that, because to me it felt like the coverage kind of took two forms. First of all, it was, this is a masterstroke by ACT, and well done, ACT, and this is fantastic. And then it sort of became a little bit more snide and a little bit more sneery. And let's play videos of Paul's worst moments, and let's remind everyone that he stood before and missed out in the Wairarapa. And it just seemed to shift in tone. Did you pick up much of that? Am I misreading it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was definitely a shift in tone. But I think, you catch the media by surprise, and they're forced to actually respond in a very reasonable fashion before they can go back and think about different ways that they can twist and turn the story and actually obscure the story. You're right, when they talk about my standing in 1999, the inaccuracies around that know no bounds, but actually journalists don't care about accuracy when it comes to something like that. They're trying to contextualize their own determination of the story. So accuracy around the event they're quoting is of no interest to them at all. Yeah,
I don't want to use the cliche about being on the other side of the media lens and all that sort of thing, but has it been interesting for you to be the subject of the news in this way, to sort of stand back from the coverage and sort of see it as an ex-journo and found it interesting to look at the coverage?
Yeah, it has. And I mean, when I think about the coverage, I think perhaps we don't give enough credit to people who put themselves forward, who, I hate using the word sacrifice, but I mean, to a degree, in terms of time and heartbeats, it is a huge sacrifice. And you ask people, why are you doing it? But then quite often the media have determined why this person is doing it, and irrespective of their answer, they will persecute them until presumably this person, I don't know, lies and says what they want them to hear. It is interesting, but I think it is something that you have to be prepared to accept happens. You can't change it, and to try is to fail, if you know what I mean. That famous saying, "Explaining is losing."
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. So I think you just have to listen to it and think low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and we've both been in media for a long time. You're a little longer than me, I think, and I've been out of it for a while. And we both know that there's always been that tendency of media to adopt a narrative and then make everything fit that narrative, never let the facts get in the way of a good headline, all that kind of belief. But it seems to have got worse, doesn't it?
There's no question it's got worse. And one of the reasons for that, and obviously it was always important to write in a way that you grab the attention of your audience. Obviously, if you don't have their attention, there's no point writing the story or presenting the story. But now it's almost get their attention at any cost. And the first casualty, of course, is fact.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you about mistrust in media a little bit later on, but actually it's as good a place as any to ask you about it. And it is interesting how we have this much trumpeted mistrust in media now, and there's no doubt there's some truth to it. I think mainstream media has taken a knock in terms of its credibility and trust, and I think media themselves are quite blind to it. When you're in the game, you're actually quite blind to it. And I was probably guilty of this as much as anyone. You sort of, media like to see themselves as sort of guardians of the truth and honesty. And, we are here to challenge those in power. And there's a certain sort of pomposity to that I feel
there absolutely is.
Yeah. I'm sure that's a contributing factor.
Well, quite often the media become very indignant when they hear things like that, and automatically, as you're suggesting, put themselves up on a pedestal, looking down on the people that are criticizing this, rather than think, why? Why is there a real groundswell of people who are so anti-traditional media in general, but particularly traditional news sources? Because there must be something in it, and certainly there must be a reason behind it, which, I think... we're living in a time where everyone's a broadcaster and everyone's a publisher. And there are so few checks and balances. You throw into that the algorithms, which basically run our lives, and you can be surrounded only with people you agree with, only people you disagree with. I mean, you can take your pick, but then the algorithm will create a foundation on which your news service is based on. So truth often is a casualty in that. And certainly the one big casualty is perspective. Because one of the things that I think in media, traditional media, or for want of a better term, legitimate media, you always try and do is actually create an accurate as much as possible perspective on a story. And I think perspective has completely gone. Now, Trump has been a real leader in this, fake news. There is absolutely no question that fake news is alive and well. The epicenter of it in the developed world is probably the United States of America. I mean, there are different versions of fake news when it comes to the way certain governments around the world manipulate news. I'm thinking the Chinese as an example, where it's not so much fake news, it is completely curated truth. But in the United States, the fake news promoted by these extraordinarily partisan news organizations, which are very powerful, I think that has been a huge contributor to the overall feeling that news has lost its way and that you can't necessarily trust it. The interesting thing is the platforms that people go to because they can't trust traditional news are truly untrustworthy, and yet they speak their truth to them. They speak that individual audience member's truth.
Yeah, that's very true. And you make a good point that mainstream media lack the awareness or the ability to self-analyze and self-criticize and think, well, maybe there's actually some truth to it. Maybe we should actually think about what we're doing wrong. And of course, the more indignant they become and the more holier than thou they become, the more it drives people away from them and to the alternative news sites, which, as you point out, are actually far, far worse. But yeah, I really feel like media need to actually take on board what they're hearing, and rather than protest about it and sort of be quite righteous about it, actually try and take something from it and learn from it. But
and it's in all of our lives too, that sort of attitude. I think a very good example of it was in the States. I was there during the Clinton-Trump election campaign and the ultimate victory of Trump. And this was very much the problem with the Democrats. They sat so far, holier than thou, so far above Trump in his campaign, they were convinced that they were going to win. When they didn't win, they didn't say, clearly you would say, Trump is, to one degree or another, a complete bloody lunatic. He's a nutter of the highest order in many ways. And yet he was elected in by a majority of people in one of the biggest democracies in the world. So that's a message. We could learn something from that. This comes back to your comments re the media, but rather than learn something from it, they're so holier than thou and indignant, they actually protest against Trump when he wins. And they couldn't get it, but these were actually protests against democracy. It was democratic. They were protesting against democracy. And I'm not saying this because I'm either pro-Republican or pro-Democrat. They learned nothing. And then rather than regroup and say, we've been sent this extraordinary message from the constituency, rather than regroup, they spent all their time trying to thwart Trump as a legitimately elected president, which is why 4 years later, they come up with this bizarre collection of people to try and challenge him, rather than coming up with fantastic policies and a great person who could take him head on and so easily be, presumably, a great president.
I was going to ask you for your thoughts on Trump later on, actually. So while we're here, we might as well stick with it. I mean,
we're all over the place with your preconceived idea of the way this was going to go.
And what do you make of Trump? I mean, leaving aside the comment you just made at the start, I mean, as a political force, is he somebody that you have a sort of grudging admiration or respect for in any way?
It's hard, isn't it? Admiration, respect. I suppose there is a grudging admiration and respect for him, certainly a grudging admiration. I mean, he has achieved what very, very few people can achieve. After a bruising defeat, after a ludicrous response to the bruising defeat, he came back and won again. And no matter what you look at, no matter how much you complain about the voting system and money and everything else, you've still got the second largest democracy in the world democratically electing someone who on paper shouldn't have stood a chance to be selected in the first place, let alone elected. So, as I say, that is a very strong message. Yes, begrudgingly, I don't even know if it's begrudgingly, you have to respect him.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had John Key on one of these earlier in the year, and we got to talking about Trump, and I think where we both landed was that whether you like him personally or like his politics, you kind of have to respect him as a force of political nature. You know, the will and the determination and the utter unbending confidence of the man. It's hard to see a parallel, isn't it? He stands alone.
It's hard to see a direct parallel anyway. I mean, it is that unfaltering confidence, which is astoundingly misplaced. And yet because he is so committed to it, it is real. You know, it's real just because he's that committed to it.
Which is quite incredible, isn't it? Is to know something is untrue, but to just rigidly stick
to it. Which he must.
Which he must.
He must know it's untrue. But he's sold it to himself.
Yeah, exactly. He's sold it. He's told it so many times and told it to himself that becomes his truth. It's quite amazing, isn't it, really?
You know how they say, there is a time and a place for everyone. You know, when Trump came along and was voted in for that first term, that was his time and that was his place. Because, as I say, it was a clear message that the voters were sending. The status quo was no longer acceptable. People had been overlooked. They'd been disenfranchised. You know, huge states in America had been disenfranchised. But as I say, rather than learn anything from that, the Republicans just gleefully thought, oh, the guy won. You know, we're in. Nothing to worry about now. And the Democrats thought, oh, my God, the guy won. How can we thwart him? How can we make sure he's not able to do any of the things he was democratically elected to do? I mean, one of the things I said at the time, I wrote a book about this, largely about this. One of the things I said was, he's probably the most honest president in my living memory, but probably the most dishonest person to have ever been president. At the end of the day, everything he was trying to do and that he was being thwarted from doing was everything he actually campaigned. It was all of his campaign platforms. So for protesters to turn around and say, well, this is appalling. I mean, who does he think he is doing this? Well, he's the person that was democratically elected standing on the platform of these exact policies and strategies.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating time in US and world politics, really, and we could probably talk about that all afternoon. But let's leave media and politics aside just for a moment. And this is an MTA podcast, and obviously MTA, which you will be familiar with as a renowned car lover. So let's talk about cars, and you love your cars, don't you, Paul?
I love cars. I love cars. They are and have always been. I'm just thinking, is that true? Have always been. I remember when I was a little boy, we had a Vauxhall Velux, which had a steel dash and those sort of faux leather shiny seats. And when you turned corners, because there were no seatbelts, you would literally slide from one side of this enormous car to the other and back again. And I would shout out from the back seat to my father to turn more corners. And usually the budgie in the steel budgie cage, George, the budgie, would be sitting on the seat next to me. So George and me would be sliding backwards and forwards. So I think it's safe for me to say, basically, I have always loved cars and motoring.
What is it about them?
Freedom. It's freedom. No matter how many restrictions there are placed around you, you get in the car and you experience freedom. You are the driver. You are the destiny. And apart from that, of course, there's the ability for them to take you to so many different places and so many different experiences. But I think, in a word, it's freedom.
Are you the sort of car lover that can open the bonnet and disassemble the engine and put it back together and you know it all? Or are you more just, look, I love driving, I love being behind the wheel, I love the beauty and power of a car, but are you also somebody that knows the mechanics and can do your own repairs?
I've bought quite expensive cars that I've never looked under the bonnet of, like ever. Not just before I've bought them, but for all the time I've owned them. And having said that, I mean, sometimes I look under the bonnet and just marvel, just look at this huge thing with discs and coloured bits of plastic. But no, I because I've had so many cars and so many bad cars over the years, I've become familiar with some aspects of troublesome engines and things like that. But I'm quite happy not even to know what's under the bonnet as long as it sounds right.
How many cars do you think you've had?
Oh, gosh. I would be very interested to know. I've got quite a few now. I don't know that it would be 200, so I can't say hundreds, but I will have definitely had more than 100 cars in my life, I would imagine.
How many do you have at the moment?
At the moment, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, about 5 or 6. 5. I've got a Defender, so this is my favourite daily driver. I've got the 130 Defender, so that's the long one.
Right.
Quite a new one of those, which I absolutely love. I mean, I just love it because it's a proper. As much as a new car can be nowadays, it's a proper war machine.
Yeah. I think John Key's got one of those too. Actually, I think
he actually. Well, I like to take a little bit of pride in this. I think I may have had something to do with getting him out of the Bentley 4-wheel drive and getting him into the Range Rover. Which is a beautiful, the Range Rover is fantastic. It's not as good as the Defender, but it's considerably more expensive. But I managed to weasel him out of his Bentley SUV, which I just don't know. They're clever and they're beautiful and everything like that, but I just don't think they look right. In boating terms, we would say they don't have good row away.
Right. What else is in your stable that you've got? I think you said you had 5 or 6 at the moment.
I love Mustangs. I've got a 50th anniversary Mustang GT in New Zealand.
Beautiful.
Which, honest to goodness, they are great cars. Not only do they have that fantastic position in the motoring world as true classic chunks of motoring history, but they are a lot of car for the money.
Yeah.
They are beautiful, beautiful design, quite basic, really, not as high tech as a lot, but they are beautiful. So I've got that one here. Then in America, I have a very straightforward V6 Mustang that I bought in 2011. I've done 61,000 miles in it. In the States, probably my 61,000 best miles I've done in my life.
What year is that Mustang?
What's that?
What year is that Mustang?
Now, this is disappointing. Not only is it the V6, but it's a 2011.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because of the nature of my motoring over there, while I wanted to buy a 65 or a 67, when you leave a car locked up in your garage for a long period of time, it is better that you bought it new and that it starts straight away. And it has been incredible. But yeah, I couldn't really go for something classic because you don't want to arrive and then spend the first 2 weeks getting the car to start.
Yeah. Isn't the 68 or the 69 the kind of gold standard Mustang? Is that the bullet Mustang? Or have I got my years?
Yeah, I think that was the 69. I mean, the 65, if you can get a good 65, which is basically, I always try and remember, is the first Mustang, the 64 model, but sold in the 65 year, I think. But if you can get something 69, pre-69, in great condition, you've got a very special car. There's actually a company in the States that are making 1965 Mustangs, and they'll make them to order. So they're basically built on a legitimate chassis from a wrecked car, but they completely remake it. So it's got power steering, it's got great air conditioning, it's got everything that the Mustang didn't have in those days. But it is really it's a proper 65 Mustang, apart from the fact that it's got all the luxuries. But they're about 385,000 US. So
a lot of dosh.
A lot of dosh.
What did you think when Mustang went electric?
Well, I suppose like all Mustang lovers, we don't see that as a Mustang. Just because you call it a Mustang. I mean, there's that saying about ducks: if it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. That's like saying a dog walks along and you say that's a duck, it's not a duck. And that's what an electric Mustang is. They put the horse on the front and called it a Mustang, but yeah, it's not a Mustang.
Fair enough. When I was sort of looking back and doing a little bit of research on some of the cars you had, I think the first thing that popped up was a 2010 Herald story that reported that you had your eye on a Aston Martin Rapide. Did you end up buying one?
I didn't. I've had a DB9 in the past, but I didn't end up getting a Rapide. Another one that I've been reported as saying I was going to get, which I fully intended to get. I would love to get a Suburban, Chevy Suburban, new. Do you know, as a car badge, that is the longest continuous car badge in the United States history of motoring. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah.
And they are amazing. It's like driving in a small village, empty of people, but nothing else. You've got all this furniture and all this space. It is fantastic.
Wow.
But yes, never ended up getting one of those. I tell you what I do have, which is very lovely. I've got a 1950 Daimler, which, I mean, you love them and you look at them and you think, oh, God, why don't I use that more? It's largely because they're hugely impractical and they're just not easy drives. And you sit in classic cars like that and you drive along and there's something about it that you think this should be more enjoyable than it is, but it's actually largely just hard work.
Yeah. Right.
But I also bought I got a certificate with it. This was about a year ago, the last F-Type Jag.
Wow.
Which is quite special because Jag have actually closed the assembly line down. So that is a real slice of motoring history because that is, essentially they will do no more two-door sports cars. They'll continue to make the sort of, not two-door, they'll continue to do the sort of four-seat two-door coupes. But basically that car is the last of the true two-door Jag sports cars.
Wow. Ever owned or driven an E-Type? Talking about Jags?
Yes, a long, long, long time ago. Those were cars that were, in a way, they were more than the sum total of their parts, but, and again, great slice of motoring history. But they were a bit expensive to keep on the road, weren't they?
Yes, well, they would be now. They would be at the moment, yeah, for sure.
But, in the day, quite often with vehicles, you think, oh, that costs a lot, but It's years and years ago, my father said to me, this was over boats mostly, and it was about fuel. And he said, it doesn't matter how much it costs to fill the tank. It's how quickly it empties that counts. And I feel that very much with cars in terms of the price. It almost doesn't matter how much the car costs. Mm-hmm. And obviously, well, for instance, I'd never spend $385,000 US on a reconstructed Mustang. But largely, the most important price with a car is how much is ownership going. How much is it going to cost to have this car in the garage and use? And a lot of cars, from that point of view, just don't make the grade. Mm.
This might be like asking you to name your favourite child or grandchild, but do you have a favourite car that you've owned or currently own?
I've had a few Rolls Royces over the years, and they fit that last category perfectly. The price of buying a Rolls Royce is almost insignificant compared with the price of keeping it on the road.
Right.
And they just, for want of a better term, bite you in the arse once too often. And in the end, you have to say, look, I just can't put up with this anymore. I'm not going to be, I'm going to be treated like this by a car. They're the cats of the motoring world, aren't they, really? Feed me, keep me warm, look after me, but don't expect to cuddle. But I still think my first Silver Shadow 2, It was just magnificent, They're the cars of dreamers. They're made by dreamers. So they're truly wonderful, magical, theatrical things, but hugely impractical.
Is the ticking of the clock truly the loudest thing in the car?
Well, no. It's the mechanical problems that are the loudest thing in the car, and they are endless. And then it's the fact that, for no good reason, just a couple of years after manufacture, the rubber in the windows is getting a bit. And they'll just say, I think we'll need to replace the rubber. The car's only 2 years old. I mean, what car needs new rubber in the windows after 2 years?
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. I imagine the loudest noise would be the mechanical faults, followed by the irate swearing of the driver at some point, would be.
Yeah. And then the repeated closing of the trunk to try and get it to actually latch. It's a Rolls Royce, for goodness sake. Why can't I just tap it gently with one finger? No, you have to slam it down and then it bounces back up again.
Oh, God, you don't need that. I mean, really, ideally, you, of course, have a chauffeur to take care of that problem in an ideal world, don't you? That's the chauffeur.
Well, actually, if we go back to the whole point of the Rolls Royce, you absolutely have to have a chauffeur. Only someone on very bad form would drive their own Rolls Royce. That's why the Bentleys were created, of course. Yeah. The Bentley was the driver's car, and the Rolls Royce was the chauffeured car.
Yeah. I think James Bond did wonders for Bentley, because before he actually goes to Aston Martin, if you read the books, he's a Bentley man, and I think that was one of the reasons why. As a sports car, it got such acclaim and reputation, was that it was Bond's first choice of car. The movies popularised him in the Aston Martin.
Yes,
but he's actually a Bentley man in the books, which is interesting.
Oh, my gosh.
And obviously also you're a big fan of the road trips, and I think as we speak, you haven't been long back from Route 66, is that right? Earlier this year you were on Route 66?
Well, I'm just back from, just about a month back from the States, and I've got a place in Palm Springs, and one of the joys of Palm Springs that a lot of people overlook is it's in a great part of the roading system. You're right on the I-10, so you've got LA in one direction, Phoenix in the other direction. And then if you spool off a little bit to the side, you've got San Diego in another direction and Vegas in one direction, and then Amarillo in another. It's just fantastic. The sort of spontaneous road trips you can do. I was watching the other day. I watched Erin Brockovich again, and it's a great movie. Have you watched that recently?
Not recently. I have seen it. Yeah. Honest
to goodness, it really holds up. So I watched Erin Brockovich, and I was sitting there in Palm Springs watching it, and I thought, oh God, I'll go to Hinckley tomorrow. Which, of course, is the devastated town where it was centred. And so you just do. And it was only about 2 hours away from where I live. I didn't know that at the time. I got out I almost said Atlas. I just tapped it into the iPad and discovered it was miraculously closer than I thought. So just did a sort of like a half-day trip to Hinckley and back. I mean, that's motoring. That's, all of a sudden you've got this car that you love and you've taken it from your garage in into this totally different place. It's transformed you into this, epicenter of this extraordinary scandal and environmental disaster.
Yeah.
That's motoring.
Have you ever been tempted to do the coast-to-coast drive, sort of LA to New York, or the other way around?
I've never really. I mean, that takes a long time. That to do that's a big drive, and you have to have a fair, because of course you've got to get back again as well. So that's a fair time commitment. But I do chunks of drives, like the LA to San Diego. If you can stay on the 1 rather than the 101, if you can stay on the PCH, my gosh, it's supposed to be one of the 10 best drives in the world. You always wonder how accurate those things are. But that is a sensational drive. The things that you can see on the way, the world-class things you can see on the way. And the other thing, of course, is Route 66. But Route 66 has now become almost impossible to do as a purist, partly because at times it is just so blooming frustrating. Because, to the left or the right of you, there's the interstate and people are doing 70 miles an hour and you're doing 30 miles an hour on this shitty blooming part of nondescript Route 66. So the best way to do it is to ricochet between the interstate and old Route 66. So what I would normally do if I do chunks of Route 66 is you choose the towns on Route 66 you want to see, then turn off the interstate to the town and then do a little bit of old Route 66,
right,
on either side of it and then back on the interstate again.
Do you have the song stuck in your head for days afterwards?
Yeah, you do.
You do. Oh,
you do. And then, and there's multiple songs, of course, but I know the one you're talking about. But then there are other little songs that take you. Like, have you stood on the corner in Winslow, Arizona?
I have not, but I know the song you're referring to very well, yeah.
Honestly, it is. Americans do that so well. Winslow is, it's a shithole, basically. There's no reason to go to Winslow. I remember taking my youngest daughter. We were driving, I can't remember, we were going to Flagstaff from somewhere further up the top of the country on the I, whatever it is. And I saw the sign for Winslow. And we were both quite hungry because we'd been driving for several hours. And I said to my daughter, let's go and stand on the corner in Winslow. She had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, the famous corner in Winslow, Arizona. Anyway, then we saw a sign for a Denny's. So because I'm a foodie, obviously, and I can tell my luxury food areas, we pull into Denny's and this guy comes up to us to serve us. And I mean, clearly this was someone who didn't know what day of the week it was, or probably what year it was. And he just stood there without saying anything. And Bella ordered her food. And I said, are we close to the corner? And this is a Denny's, like in a truck stop, before we were even at Winslow. And he sighed and he pointed out the window and he said, you go down to the end of that road, you turn right, take the third left at the traffic lights and then park and you'll be at the corner. And I've got to say, Bella, who thinks I'm a nutter most of the time, was very impressed that clearly the corner was something worth going to see. And honestly, if there's one little surprise, it's something like that. The song, what is the song?
Take It Easy.
Yeah, Easy. That's right, the Eagles, Easy. Yeah. Standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, such a pretty sight to see. It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford.
Turning around, when you get to the corner,
exactly. When you get to the corner in this town, which is essentially almost derelict, you come around and you park your car. We parked under this scrabby little tree for a little bit of shade, and there was a park bench next to it. The park bench was made out of the tailgate of a flatbed Ford. Eagles music was playing on speakers down the street. There was a huge Route 66 sign on the road. It's a T-junction. There's a lamppost. There's a statue of a guy with a guitar standing there. There is a real flatbed Ford parked there, empty, of course, parked at the side. And there's a mural of a building painted on a brick wall, and reflected in the window of the mural is a girl sitting behind the driving wheel of a flatbed Ford that's parked there.
Genius. Yeah.
I mean, genius. And on a top window, which is all painted on, there's an eagle just sitting at the window ledge.
I think
mean, it's
that's fantastic. Yeah. I think that statue is either Glenn Frey, or who was the Eagles guitarist and singer of that particular song, or it might even be, I'm pretty sure it is Glenn Frey, but I think Jackson Browne also had a hand in that song. I can't remember.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And I think it is Glenn Frey, but I think just across from it on another park bench there's another statue which is probably who did you say who had, because he did have a hand in the song?
Jackson Browne.
Yeah, Jackson Browne. I think Jackson Browne is on the park bench.
Yeah. Oh,
beautifully done.
Fantastic.
And in Illinois, here's a wonderful thing. If you do Route 66, in Illinois on a part of Route 66, and I can't remember the town, but it's easy to find, they've got this huge Route 66 mural, and they've got a ramp that you can drive your car up on. So your car, and then you can, get out, go back and take a photo of the mural, and your car is in the mural. Right. It's a great keepsake for doing Route 66.
Fantastic. I guess I have to ask, now that you are entering political life as a potential member of Parliament, I probably have a duty and obligation to ask full disclosure on whether you've had any sort of speeding tickets or brushes with the law as a driver, as a motorist. Is there anything that you're happy to share and put on the record?
I've had speeding tickets.
Yeah.
Of course I have, and it's always a fair cop. And sometimes it's annoying. For me, it's annoying when clearly the road is wide open. You are not driving dangerously. I mean, you're still breaking the law, but you're not driving dangerously. You're in a car which is entirely competent. You're entirely competent. There's no issues with the road. The road is entirely competent. And you're pulled over for doing usually an embarrassingly small number of Ks above the speed limit.
Yeah.
That's annoying, but it is a fair cop. And what would you say about it?
Just last subject on the car sort of side of things, I guess, and slightly convoluted, curly one, but hopefully within the rules of fair play. And we've just been talking about cars and your love of cars, and obviously you prefer the petrol-driven car to the electric car. I think
100%.
100%,
yes.
Right. Okay, how do you marry this? And I'm not trying to be a tricky bugger with this, but how do you marry this with the environmental side of you? Because you are an environmentalist. You protested nuclear testing in the Pacific, and you want to leave New Zealand a better place for your grandkids. And part of that, of course, is the air we breathe and emissions and clean air. So how do you reconcile? Is it a internal debate for you to reconcile the fact that you drive petrol-driven cars and yet you want to leave cleaner air and a cleaner New Zealand for your grandkids?
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting. I mean, no one else has ever said I am an environmentalist, but I very much am. I mean, I've got a tiny little farm in the Kaipara, and the joy that I get out of the fact that as soon as I bought it, the first thing I did was fence off all of the dams and did a little bit of planting in there. But rather than actually planting, I thought, I'll let Jesus do my gardening and see what happens if I just leave it be. And there's like little natural forests that have grown around the dams. It gives me more pleasure than anything else on the property to look at these sort of 6 or so areas. But no, to answer your question, I mean, I love, that noise when you start up a V8. I mean, it probably now costs $5 every time you hear it just to flick the engine over, but it's $5 I'll gladly pay just to hear that noise. At the end of the day, we are running this planet. Yes, I want to leave it in better shape. And we're changing our behaviours. We're changing our behaviours because it's making sense to change our behaviours, not necessarily because governments have mandated that the behaviours have to change. I mean, one of the best examples for that was when Labor years and years and years ago, I think it was Helen Clark, who decided that incandescent light bulbs were going to kill us all. And so we needed to use LED light bulbs, or those dreadful ones, which turned out to be poisonous. You don't have to mandate things because the market will determine. If it's logical, if it is good, then people will do it. The best example I can think of is CD players. I mean, no one outlawed CDs. No one outlawed the selling of CD players. But how many people buy CDs now? The market decided that the technology has changed. And And so while people can still buy them and enjoy them, why would you? Very few people do. And the same thing will be true of V8s, as is already happening now. I mean, the huge uptake in electric vehicles. The way to do that is not to subsidise them. It's for it to be clearly the best financial option for people, and people will turn to them. It's just not for me. But I mean, in the end, it will be. It'll be like the reconstructed 65 Mustang. You know, in the end, no matter how much I want one, maybe I'll just think, look, I don't want it enough to spend that kind of money.
Yeah, right. So you can live quite easily with yourself on this issue in terms of driving something that might be high emitting, or a petrol-driven vehicle, fossil fuel power vehicle, and the sort of desire to leave a clean, healthy environment for grandkids. Are you okay with that? I'm not asking this in a smart alecky way. I'm just genuinely curious.
No, I get it completely. And we're full of conundrums. The answer is yes, I am completely happy with it. I mean, it's like the Greens. When I say the Greens, I mean greenies, who still go on holiday. They still travel on planes. I mean, we're trying to run our lives. I mean, I love meat. I mean, a really nice steak. Can you beat it? I mean, honestly, a really nice steak is perhaps one of the greatest joys of my life. Well, if I really cared about the environment, I wouldn't eat steak, would I? We have to not compromise, but we have to accommodate having the best lives we can possibly have with leaving the best country we can possibly leave.
One of the big challenges, I guess, for the kind of generation we're talking about when we're talking about grandkids and kids is the issue of them leaving. Right, making New Zealand that they want to stay in or return to, because so many have gone to Australia or other parts of the world, which has always happened, but obviously is happening in high numbers at the moment. What would you do? What would be your plan to keep young New Zealanders in this country or bring them back?
And I think it's the second part of that is important. I think it's the bringing them back. I think when you live in a country like this, if we highly educate, world-class education, then I would expect the natural outcome of that to be a fair percentage of those highly educated people will want to get experience offshore, or at the very least, spend a decent amount of time offshore to get perspective on our place in the world and their place in the world. But why should they come back? And so much of that is about attitude. And this comes back to one of the reasons why I'm standing. I mean, fundamentally, there are two reasons that I've decided to stand for ACT. One, because quite frankly, look at me now, I've only got so many heartbeats left. Do I really want to sacrifice all these heartbeats? The answer is yes, for two reasons. One, it became obvious that there was a chance that at this next very important election, the left could take the lead. We could have a left-leaning coalition. And I really believe that would be a disaster for our economy, stroke country, an absolute disaster. So that was one of the key motivating factors. The other one was looking at my grandchildren and thinking, how is it possible to get the same sort of spirit in this country that I remember when I was growing up? And when I talk about spirit, and that's been misinterpreted in one interview, it was misinterpreted as I'm trying to replicate the political environment that existed when I was growing up. Well, I wouldn't want to do that. That was, in many ways, it was diabolical. But the attitude of people was so different. You'll remember it as well, because we're approximately the same age. There was an aspirational attitude. I remember if someone in the street, if one of the parents in the street got a new car, we'd all just stand around and talk to her, when can we get a new car? When can we get something like that? Have you seen the car? All the parents would, oh my gosh, nothing was out of reach. We were dreaming because we were builders and pioneers. And a lot of people say, oh, well, that's all airy-fairy. But you know what? That made a real difference. New Zealand was second to none. We were building this extraordinary nation. There's no reason why we shouldn't have that attitude now, because, you travel and you look back at New Zealand and you think, my God, it is paradise. We've got so much opportunity, so much potential, so much natural resource. And yet there is this overall feeling of depression, might be a little bit too strong, but disappointment. No, we seem to treat a lot of things with suspicion rather than with sort of pride or wonder. And I think that is what will bring people back, changing that atmosphere. And how do you do it? Because, I mean, then you come back to policies, but more importantly, I think you come back to philosophies. You don't do that by having a draconian government. You do that by celebrating freedom. And again, this comes back to EVs. You don't do that by saying you all have to drive EVs. You do that by giving people the choice to drive EVs.
I certainly agree with you about draconian governments, and I guess that sort of leads to the point that it starts from the top, right? But hasn't our politics, and I'm not talking about any party in particular, but hasn't it got so obsessed with point scoring and personality and trivialization of things and flip-flopping on policy? One party says one thing, the other party immediately says the other. I mean, in terms of that, creating that spirit of optimism and excitement and we can do it, it starts from the top, doesn't it? But have we sort of lost that? It feels to me like we have.
It is extraordinarily adversarial, but also it's just plain nasty. And there's a lot of digs for the sake of digs. Also, there is this splattering of policy, and I think the average person must sit there and listen to some of these policies and think, really, is that going to change the world? Is it even going to happen? I mean, particularly under MMP, I mean, it is slightly harder to hold political parties to account because essentially at the end of the day, all policies really are up for negotiation, or at least almost all policies. I think it is more important, and policies are important, but it's more important to look at what is the philosophical direction that this party in power will always want to take this country in. When they have policies or when they have the ability to affect other coalition parties' policies, in what way will they want to affect them? Where do they see New Zealand being and how do they see we can get there? And that's where things like freedom come in. That's where things like government come in. Like, our government's too big. It's not too big because people sat down and thought we need to have a bigger government. It's too big because of glory projects. It's too big because someone decided that something needed to be added on, but nothing was ever taken away.
So would you cut the number of MPs, for example?
Ultimately, I think the number of MPs should be cut. I certainly think the number of ministers should be cut. Certainly the number of ministries should be cut. I mean, we're now actually talking ACT policy. But overall, government should be smaller. The ACT policy, which has been reluctantly accepted by National, is to take the public service back to 2017 levels. I mean, while Labor was in power, and obviously, it was a special time because of COVID. While Labor was in power, the public service increased by 34%. And it basically hasn't shrunk back. Are we 34% better off in terms of service delivery? No. Is it 34% more expensive? Yes. We cannot afford it. And yet, when it was suggested that these numbers be knocked on the head, that we look at it, the people that came up and spoke against it, the parties that spoke against it, no one actually said, well, actually, it is a good idea to take a look at this. What we want to do is ring fence frontline services. We don't want it to affect, police on the beat. We don't want it to affect teachers in front of children, nurses in front of patients. But there's got to be a way we can cut it back. We can cut back the bureaucracy. So it has grown and grown and grown, like a hedge that you don't prune. It's got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's still a hedge, but it's now completely out of control and we can't afford it. We could maybe turn a bit of a blind eye if it weren't for the fact that every single day we borrow millions of dollars just to keep this show on the road.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question kind of in two parts about your personal aspirations in Parliament? And I think you've probably been asked this in some shape or form by everyone, but just a couple of quotes, if I could, or not quotes, comments that I came across. One was a reference in a few stories about you and with you, about you getting bored quite easily. Popped up in a few of them. And then the second thing that popped up recently was Peter Williams was asked for his opinion by the Herald on your tilt at Parliament, and he said that you were a team player as long as you're captain of the team. So I guess the question in two parts is, part one, are you in this for the long haul, or is this something that you might get bored with if you don't win a seat or get into Parliament at the election? And second part, which kind of depends on the first part a little bit, are you looking at the leadership? There is rumour, scuttlebutt, that David Seymour is closer to the end of his career than at the start when it comes to Parliament. Are you looking to be in for the long haul, and do you have leadership ambitions?
Okay, let's go through those. Firstly, the boredom thing. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I don't have the greatest attention span in the history of the world, but I really want to achieve something, and so I haven't entered this lightly. To a degree, and a lot of people have said this to me. The worrying thing for me is a lot of the people that have said, how are you going to handle, Parliament, how are you going to handle being in there in the long nights, sitting, listening to people clack on. The worrying thing is a lot of the people that have said that know an awful lot more about being in the House than I ever do. So the honest answer to that would be, look, I don't know. I don't know. What I do know is that I'm completely committed to making a difference. But I don't have a long runway. I'm not joining this. I'm not interested, even remotely interested in a career. Having said that, I can't expect to go in for 3 years. If I was only committing one term, I can't expect in that one term, no matter how well things are going, for me to really make the difference. But I'm a 2-term person. I think I'm prepared to commit the next 6 years to this. But I've got to be honest, looking at it from where I am now, I can't imagine. I'll be in my 70s, very early 70s, but I'll be in my 70s in 6 years' time. Mm-hmm. I thought I'd get to 70. I didn't think anyone got to 70 many years ago when I was much younger. No one does. That's an unimaginable age when you're, in your 20s. So really, it's a 6-year commitment for me. If I don't get in, you said, that's a tricky one. If I don't get in, will I hang around and stand again? I wouldn't be able to give it 6 years if I did that, because that would be my 6 years with 3 years. So I don't know. I wouldn't commit myself either way there. But I think there would be every chance that I wouldn't hang around for that.
Which I think would be fair enough, to be absolutely honest.
Yeah.
And on the leadership side of things?
I'm not interested in being the leader. Quite frankly, the effort that I would have to put into that would take, I think, potential effort away from really making a difference. Now, I know a lot of people would say, well, as leader, you could make more of a difference. But I don't want to spend any of my time positioning myself, angling myself, just not, because I'm not interested in a career. It is not something I'm interested in at all.
No, fair enough. And I don't know you from a bar of soap, but from what I do know, I think you would hate it. I think there would be a level of politics that that would drive you around the bend.
Being leader, yeah. If you want to get yourself stuck in and achieve things, I think, what David has achieved is extraordinary. He has built this party. This is a real political force. He's the Deputy Prime Minister. He's achieved a huge amount. He's been in there for 13 years. I don't have that kind of runway.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I'm interested in your thoughts on a few topics of interest, shall we say. We could sit here and talk policy all day, but I'm more interested, and I think people who are listening are probably more interested in your personal views on some subjects. So I just got a little list that I thought I'd run through with you, and if you could just sort of shoot from the hip and give us your personal opinion, whether that's the same as your political opinion is up to you. But if I just ran through a sort of
let's just say straight up, because I don't have two different opinions in terms of political and personal. I only have my personal opinions, but I'm completely attuned to Axe philosophy. So the only area we would differ probably would be subtle differences with individual policies, but the philosophy I'm completely on tune with. So I'll just, as you say, shoot from the hip.
Shoot from the hip. First one, should we change the flag?
No. The reason I slightly hesitate is I can't imagine that we won't change the flag at some time. Should we change the flag almost implies, should we do it now? And the answer to that is no. I think there has to be a reason to change the flag. And thinking that you're going to change it one day or thinking that it might be a nice idea to change it isn't a reason. I think there needs to be a groundswell. The time has to be right. And then, of course, what do we change it to?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be changing our flag, a few months after we change it because people realise that was actually a rubbish choice. So I think a lot more thought it's got to be the right time for us to do it, and at the moment it's not.
So in the referendum, you voted to retain the flag. Would that be fair to say? Or?
Absolutely.
Yep,
absolutely.
Cool. Okay,
yeah.
sort of a follow-up one that's linked to the flag. How about becoming a republic?
No, I don't see. I don't think that it's broken at the moment. I think there's something vaguely charming and economically very sound about being part of the Commonwealth. I would not want to see us become a republic, and I can't see what the benefit in that would be.
Also linked to that one, the honours system. Were you in favour of retaining knighthoods and damehoods, or would you scrap those and have a New Zealand-based system?
No, I'm quite happy to retain the current system. Yeah.
Fair enough. MMP, is that a winner or a failure? What would you do? Would you keep MMP or get rid of it if you could?
I would keep MMP. And I tell you, I'm slightly hesitant when I say that. It was certainly, if we go back to the referendum, it was certainly not my choice of the options. I am a fan of proportional representation. I think, I'm just thinking back at all the options, I think I was a fan of STV as I remember it. But I am not a fan of changing the system of voting that we have. You don't, again, it's not broken. It's a long way away from perfect, but it's not broken. And I think we would both be extraordinarily alarmed at the number of New Zealanders who still don't fully understand the MMP voting system, let alone changing it for something else now.
That is true. How do you get round, though, this kingmaker problem? The Winston Peters problem where he...
Yeah, the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah. Got any thoughts on that?
Do you know, I don't think you can. Well, how you get around that is by factoring that in when you cast your vote. But of course, you only have one vote. Everyone would have to factor it in. People just don't. And it becomes so complicated. You've got to be very careful at the end that you're not being so strategic you get it completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think that is a problem. I don't think you can get around it with an MMP system. But I think the benefits outweigh that as a problem.
Yeah, I guess the only way you could get around it, and I'm sort of thinking about this on the fly, would be to raise the threshold from 5%, right? So anybody who gets into Parliament has got a reasonable mandate. Say you increased it to 10%, theoretically.
That is tricky, though.
Yeah, it could never happen. Yeah.
No, and there are a lot of people that would already argue 5% is a bit high. I actually think it's about right, 5%. But I would be very reluctant to take it any higher than that.
Yep, no, true. What about the voting age? I'm thinking again about grandkids and that sort of side of the conversation. There's a growing movement for the voting age to be 16. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not.
Too young?
Absolutely not.
Not
entirely.
Yeah, not enough judgment, not enough world experience at 16?
No, I think all of those things. When you say not enough judgment, I think quite legitimately not enough maturity. Because there are a lot of things... When I say maturity, I'm not necessarily talking academic maturity, but life maturity. There are a lot of things that you haven't considered when you're 16, a lot of things that hopefully you haven't considered, like children, like marriage, like buying houses. There are a great number of things which actually weigh very heavily on the minds of people who are giving a serious decision as to who should lead the next party, the next government. So I think 16 is too young. I think we've got it about right.
What about mandatory voting?
I hate that idea. Absolutely hate it. I used to say this on radio when I was doing talkback radio, and people would always say, it's outrageous. People fought and died so that we should vote. No, they didn't. They fought and died so that we should have the chance to vote, so that we should have the choice to vote. The last thing these people fought for was a country that forced people to vote. Mm-hmm. Another reason, of course, why you don't want to force people to vote is who are they going to vote for? If you have to force them, it means, one, they don't want to. Yeah. Two, they're not going to put any effort in to work out who they should vote for. That's not democracy. That's just plain crazy. That's a grab bag. That's a lottery. Yeah. So, no, I am very firm, as you may have guessed, I am very firmly against mandatory voting.
Which I think is firmly in line with ACT policy. I have never looked it up, but I imagine that's the case.
You know what? I'll be honest. I've never looked it up, but I know their. I've never looked at their policy. I've looked at their philosophy, and it would be. Of course, it should be.
Totally.
It's about ACT is about freedom. It's about giving people absolutely as much choice and freedom as you can give them, as long as that amount of freedom doesn't impinge on the freedom of others.
With that in mind, what about the decriminalisation of cannabis?
Tricky one. That's interesting. Had you planned to always ask that in that order?
No, actually, but it sort of presented itself as an ideal opportunity.
And it is interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, if you say, well, yes, it should be decriminalised, of course, because people should be free to stick anything in their mouths and set fire to it. But then where do you draw the line? And if you say, well, this is the logic for cannabis, so why isn't it the logic for LSD? Why isn't the logic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so you do start to cross into that boundary of, by giving you this freedom, is it going to impinge on the freedom of others? Is it going to create an environment which starts to detract from the quality of life of other people?
I feel like
at the same time, I'm very uncomfortable with criminalising people for smoking marijuana. Very uncomfortable with that. Yeah,
I kind of feel you're reaching a little bit on this one, actually. I'm quite glad that I've actually made you have to stop and think for a second, because I kind of feel that just in that answer, you were kind of thinking about it as you delivered it. And I don't think either of us probably really believes that marijuana these days is a gateway drug to heroin, the old reefer madness kind of theory, right? So really, what is the harm? And I'm playing devil's advocate and asking this question. Really, in terms of the freedom argument that you make and the other points that can be made in the health sphere as well, I guess. I mean, couldn't we just decriminalise marijuana and leave it at that? And isn't that a common sense?
We've been angsting over this for so long, and we've found this sort of marginally satisfactory ground where we sort of ignore it, where we sort of ignore the use of marijuana, and perhaps clamp down on the sale of it if it reaches a certain, it more or less is ignoring it. I am very uncomfortable with criminalising people for the use of marijuana. So I suppose I'm saying, it's something we should look at. It does fit into the whole freedom thing. I agree with you. In fact, I think one of the worst things about not legalising it, not so bad now, but certainly back in the day, you were drawn to certain people and certain groups to get the marijuana, and that is probably what led you to harder drugs. Not the marijuana, but the people you were having to associate with. I think that this is, I hate saying this is a debate we should continually have, because, my God, we've been having this debate for a long time, but we have moved much closer to satisfaction, I think, on it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I think, because there's so much more awareness and knowledge about the harm of alcohol now. Alcohol was always kind of the sleeper. Everybody was focused on drugs, narcotics, and everybody just socially accepted alcohol because it's been around for a long time.
But, there are some differences. There are some key differences. One, alcohol is not just a drug. It's an industry. It's commerce. Another one, is there an amount of alcohol that is entirely safe to drink? Yes.
Well, I think the scientists would disagree with you on that. And in terms of modern thinking, the latest thinking, I'm led to believe, is that pretty much it's like the old message: every cigarette is doing you damage, every glass of alcohol does you damage as well.
Well, I think it's true to say every cigarette you have is doing you damage. But I like to think, particularly as a red wine drinker, I like to drink. I do like to drink. I like to think that a glass of red wine a day is a tonic for good health and long life. The trouble is you get to enjoy the tonic so much that you have another glass and another, and then of course, obviously, it's a downward spiral.
Yeah, but the cannabis user would say the same thing, would he not? That this is just his little tonic for the day, just to have a puff. And
I'm absolutely sure they would. But what you can say, that it is definitely not sound to stick something in your mouth and set fire to it.
Yes, that's probably fair.
But I mean, we're not really, the thing is, we're just chatting about it. We're not really arguing a point, because I think basically both of us are on the same I think basically both of us are on the same side of this.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. And this is something that is interesting when you talk to people of a certain generation, say 18 or 20, and they have a totally different view of alcohol in the way that we might have it. And they also have a totally different view of marijuana and drugs than, again, we might have, because there's that generational thing. So I find it a fascinating area to look at.
And you're completely right. You talk to younger people, their use of alcohol is quite often exceptionally sophisticated, in a way that our use, I'm dragging you down with me, but in a way that our use is not. Like, I'm going to open a bottle of red wine and I'm just going to sit here and finish it, over X number of hours or whatever. But no, young people have very sophisticated drinking habits very often. I mean, at the same time, they also have the opposite of very sophisticated, but that's something they factor into their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really interesting conversation. I mean, this can be taken in lots of different ways, but at the same time, I do want to make sure, and ACT wants to make sure, that people have as much freedom as possible to lead the lives they choose to lead. I'll tell you something interesting about cannabis. I don't know how interesting it is, but this will make me seem like an old man. Of course, it's legal in Palm Springs, where I spend a bit of time. I'll be spending a lot less time there over the next few years, but I spend a bit of time there. It's legal there, and almost every third shop is a vape shop and a pharmacy. They call them pharmacies. What I find offensive, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden there is this, and this might just be me, this appalling smell. The smell of cannabis, that sweet, sickly smell. Now, I've got to say, I don't like the smell of cigarettes, but it just doesn't seem to pool and linger in the same way. It might just be that it's different, but I find that this is not achieving anything in the conversation, but just as a novelty comment, I find that phenomenally offensive.
No, fair enough. Can I ask, and feel free to take the fifth if you wish, but can I ask if you've ever inhaled, out of curiosity?
Look, I'm sure I have. I can honestly not remember, but I'm sure I have. I must have. How would I not have? Because I'm a naturally curious person. So I'm just going to say yes. I'm sure I went to parties where I've tried it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Just to finish, and I mean, this is actually really fascinating stuff, and I would love to pursue this a bit longer, but in the interest of both of our time, we'll sort of look to wrap things up. But I would like to just ask you one last question, which is that, you've lived your life to a certain degree in the public eye, and you've written books, and of course been the subject of media scrutiny. And so to a certain extent, a lot of people will feel they know you and they know about you, and they've pigeonholed you one way or another, and they love you or they hate you or whatever. But what is one thing that people don't know about Paul Henry?
Well, you obviously knew it. I mean, I would have, and I've never thought to say this when someone's asked me that, but when you said I'm an environmentalist, most people would be shocked, or would leap to argue with that. But I absolutely love the environment. Boating. I mean, you take your huge diesel guzzling boat and you go out into the wild blue and just marvel at it. I mean, it's just so awe-inspiringly beautiful, and not sometimes it's the opposite of beautiful, but it's always awe-inspiring. So I suppose that's one of the things that most people, except for you, didn't know about me. I am very, very taken by the environment. I love just being in it and watching it and assisting it where I can, but I don't want to assist it in a way that it eats away unreasonably at the enjoyment of my life or the life of other people. I think we should all be free to do the environmental things we want to do, and within reason to lead the lives we want to live around that.
Is that your happiest place, under sail on the ocean, heading to a Pacific island or something like that?
Being out, I mean, it's also a night. It's horrible. It's just horrible. It's a mixture of fear, boredom, and wonder. But normally the boredom is all-encompassing. Do you know the happiest thing for me is being up this little farm? I mean, even calling it a farm is perhaps slightly overstating it. But just being up there and watching it gradually grow in spite of everything that's going on in the world. The stuff grows and the pukekos wander around and God knows what's growing in the dams, but it's growing feverishly. And probably Chloe Swarbrick would be up there with a net trying to get it out and accusing me of encouraging the wrong sort of plant growth. But it looks wonderful. It has these lovely little flowers every now and then, and it comes and goes. And it shouts out the seasons. One of the things we don't get in New Zealand, well, in the South Island, lucky people down in the South Island, particularly towards the bottom, they wake up every morning and they know what season it is. In a lot of temperate parts of the world, you don't. But if you love gardens and if you love nature and that, every day you can look at it and you know what season it is. And that's pretty wonderful.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. I think that was brilliant. It's been great talking to you. Really enjoyed it. Fascinating stuff. Could have kept going for a lot longer. And
do you give medals out to people that listen to this all the way through?
Oh, I'm sure they will. A vast number of people will be listening to this all the way through. But no, that was great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed talking.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We've got some more great guests coming up on the podcast, so do remember to follow us and look out for future episodes. Thanks for joining me today. Tune in again soon.